The Bahrain test has completed its first week. Every team is deciding to play hot potato with the title of favorites, and we are out on Inters again. This time we have a guest for joining us. Neokai, how are you doing? How's the F1 season?
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be kind of interesting. I'm an F1 fan, but definitely more of a looser term. I kind of like follow F1 more to hate watch more than so like being a dedicated into the kind of the specifics. But this will be fun. I kind of like shooting the shit with F1. I talk with Trav a lot about it. He obviously had on the podcast before, so this should be fun. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, what's your favorite team and favorite driver then?
See, this is the issue. I feel like favorite team is a bit of like a harder one because I mean, I guess growing up it was always Mercedes just because of Hamilton.
Mm,
Like he was kind of like the first guy I knew basically being, getting into F1. He was like the first guy that I think most British people know, obviously being arguably kind of the greatest of all time, or definitely up there, right? And especially being from Britain, you kind of get to supporting him. But then recently with a stint at Ferrari, don't really love what I'm seeing there. So then in terms of favorite team, it's like George Russell's okay, and I guess Merc has always sort of been the one I like, but I don't know. I think recently I've found myself quite a lot of the time rooting for Williams. I just like what that team are doing. I just think like at times they seem like they're kind of quite fun in what they're bringing to the table, and it's a bit refreshing compared to like Merc, who I just don't really like following that much anymore. So I guess growing up, it really was Mercedes, just so much because of Hamilton, and I still like Russell like a decent amount, but it's just not as easy as a character to kind of latch onto. And then in terms of like favorite driver, I like Signs. I mean, that's kind of a cool guy to follow. And then I guess to a degree, just because of like the last couple of seasons, I like Oscar a lot. I kind of was rooting for him
yeah.
last season.
Mm.
Hence where my Lando hate watching came in. But yeah, I think Oscar feels like a kind of a guy that I can get behind, and someone that I guess last season especially, I was really rooting for him.
Yeah, loving Oscar and science, you'll fit right in with the show. Quacke, how did you find the Bahrain testing week?
Uh, Exciting. I didn't expect to see as many changes as we did from the
Mm,
pictures from Barcelona to Bahrain. Uh, we'll obviously get into that, but holy shit, that Audi is insane. I don't,
Mm.
yeah.
I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but Jesus, it's something else. And I'm very excited to
Mm,
see how good or bad it's gonna be in practice. But it's cool that we got like a proper test after Barcelona as well, because what I heard, I think last week was that the media was gonna be limited for Bahrain as well. But
Mm.
it's nice that we've had pretty good amounts of exposure
yeah.
for all that. So
Yeah, we
it's
just
been
got
fun.
1 hour of the broadcast, but overall it's been fun, like you said. Before we
Yeah.
get into all that action, a second F1 movie is apparently in the works. I'm sure both of you have watched the first one. Do you guys think it can find the same success without the sheer novelty of having F1 in the cinemas and all the camera tech that went with it? Neo, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love the F1 movie. I think I went to go watch in the cinema like really early doors when it came out with
Hmm.
Trav, in fact, and then we kind of both loved it. Kind of understood that yes, it's definitely fabricated in a lot of ways. Like I think
Yeah.
especially when you see kind of like Sonny Hayes, just like what is it, like it's like 4 races in a row where he's just completely breaking
Uh,
everything on purpose. You wouldn't get away with that, right? Sure,
yeah.
people get away with a little bit, but that's taking the piss. But I gotta say, like for me, the F1 movie has kind of become for me like a real comfort movie that I think I've watched it like at least 10 times now, and
Yeah.
the last eight of those, it's like background noise type of thing. I'll like watch it while playing
Mm,
FIFA, or like
Mm.
if I'm flying somewhere, I watch it. Even recently, I was flying to Thailand, and I watched it again, sort of I watched it while going on my phone doing some other stuff. The guy next to me basically watched the whole movie without any sound, but through the subtitles. And then at the end, when we landed, he was like, "What was that movie? It looks sick." And I was like, "Oh, it's the F1 movie. You should watch it." But
yeah.
yeah, no, for me, like I really like it. I think it's like Joseph Kosinski, of course, who directs
Mhm.
it. He also did like Top Gun Maverick,
Yeah.
the kind of the newer Top Gun. I love what he brings in terms of like action cinema type things. I think it's so encapsulating. I think I also really like Top Gun as well. So as long as he's involved, I basically think it's guaranteed to be good. I'm just kind of interested to see what they do now because it feels like, especially going into the second movie, they didn't set it up like there was going to be that. It
Yeah.
wasn't set up like it was meant for a sequel. It wasn't left on a cliffhanger. It kind of actually,
Mhm.
I think, had quite a nice natural ending where it was like Sonny finally wins a kind of a race, and he gets to be the greatest of all time, or the greatest on that day, as they were saying. Um, and then he left, right? And that was it. And he obviously had the opportunity to stick around, chose not to. So I do wonder,
Yeah.
like, if they're going to keep Brad Pitt involved, and I guess Sonny Hayes by that metric, like, how do they actually then do that? Does he become like a team principal, like a manager? I don't think it would make sense for him to then be like, oh, actually, now I'm coming back now. It kind of like feels like you're taking a couple of steps back. So then do they maybe do more on Joshua Pierce, kind of like focus on Damson Interest being kind of the lead of the movie, and maybe Brad becomes like a coach or a mentor? I don't know how you actually go about it, but I think generally speaking for me, with how successful I think the first one was, I think quite like universally loved. I don't think there's many people who like actively hate the movie. Sure, I think some like real I've seen like kind of a few like real like F1 kind of like nerds in a way who are like, oh, it's so unrealistic that they don't like it for that reason. But I think that also takes the fun out of it. Like you can't have a pure like even like Drive to Survive, for example. Again, another thing that gets a decent amount of flack from like F1 like real kind of stalwarts is that it is obviously kind of a lot of it fabricated, but you've got to have entertainment, right? And it's got to be a little bit, it can't be a perfect thing in a movie, or else you just watch F1, right? The movie is meant to be a little bit more audacious and grandiose and whatnot. So for me, I think as long as Joseph Kosinski is involved, I think it's going to be a good movie. He hasn't really failed me in like a few of his movies that I've seen of him. I really like how the first one was, and I think if anything, they're probably going to get more of a budget heading in towards the second one, so it could even be a little bit more lavish and a bit more entertaining. I'm just wondering generally how they go about writing it. Like if they're going to bring Sonny back in, what role is he in? If he comes back to being a driver, sure, it'd be probably fun, but it's going to be a tough thing to write to have him come back in. He's quit. He's done it. He's sort of got his medal. He's also, he's old, right? Like, let's be frank. I'm sure, sure Alonso's still kicking around, but he's older than him, and and it is kind of like getting to the point where it's like, I think when you right at the start when Ruben is talking about like the drivers who the older drivers, when he's trying to convince them to come back, he's saying like you list these three drivers who are all a little bit older when they were racing. Yeah, they are like very select few, generally speaking, as we see now with F1. They're very, very young, so I don't know how they bring it back in, but regardless, I'll be
that's the
there. I'll
question.
be excited.
Yeah. That's the question I'll throw to Quacke then. Do you think they should bring any of the drivers back for the continuity, or should it just be a fresh story from a fresh pair of eyes?
On one hand, it's a bit weird not to bring any of them back. It would be weird to do like a sequel to the movie without connecting it, like grounding it in some way. I also don't think they should do a second one. Like it's okay. This is the thing. I love Top Gun Maverick, and I loved everything that was done for that. And I was immediately excited for the F1 movie when I heard that it was the same director. And again, it was out of the park, amazing. I loved it, and it brought a lot of the same beats where like the action. There's something about like the action about Top Gun Maverick really brought like the action of being in a plane, like in a fighter jet. It brought sort of the same thing. Like, oh, you're in an F1 car. That's actually sick. It's actually awesome. I feel like it had a very natural ending. It's gonna feel a bit weird. It's kind of just maybe we just shouldn't. If they were gonna do anything, I think it would be really cool if they did like a similar concept, but just did it for a different racing series. Just like try to hit the same, because the F1 movie was great because like okay, it hits all the best beats of modern F1 racing, like all the best things about modern F1 racing, highlighted in this like super palatable format sort of, because everyone can enjoy the F1 movie. It got all of the best parts of that, put it into a movie. Take all the same good beats out of like an Indy car, but maybe that's even too similar. Rally or something like that. Try to do something like that to sort of highlight those racing series. That would be pretty cool. It would be a bit more underground. Like the F1 movie was pretty big. Obviously, everybody's gonna go see it. You're not gonna have the same thing if it's just like the WRC movie. But as for like highlighting a really cool thing, I think it would be cool to go to a different racing series and try to do it again, rather than trying to squeeze more action out of the F1 movie, because I think that was just, it was made to be one movie. I don't think they planned for there to be a sequel.
Yeah, I tend to agree with both of you on that it felt like a very cohesive story that does not really need a successor. But if they want to do the meme aspect, they can just find a driver in the junior formulas and make a F2 movie. See if that driver can make it to the. It even solves the naming problem, right? But when I watched the F1 movie, honestly, the Daytona part was the best action that I saw in the entire film, because I've watched enough F1, but I don't really catch up with the IMSA as much. So even if they try to go into another series, like you said, that would be fun for me as a F1 fan. But I think the money is still with the F1 side, so that's probably why they are interested in making it.
Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
nice to have the idea of like, could we do F2 or could we do like Formula E, for example? And they're all
Oh
like, I
yeah.
think, have their own natural storylines. I've actually like recently started like kind of enjoying Formula E. I think there's like, first of all, like I think the gimmicks about like I call them the Mario boosts, right? Where you get those little like
Yeah,
speed
yeah,
boosts
yeah.
coming through.
Yeah.
I actually think they're quite fun, but also I think there's a lot of drama. Like I forget his name now. There's like one British driver who's a piece of shit, and he is so fun because he's
Dan
awful, but
Ticktum.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just an awful person, but like he's so funny to watch because like he
Hmm.
just rages at everyone, and I kind of love that. I like having villains in like in any sort of sporting events, like even whether it's like kind of like obviously we're involved in Counter-Strike, having Counter-Strike
Yeah.
villain thing is fantastic. Every sport, I think having a villain's great, right? I think he's kind of good in that sense. So you could follow something like that. But I think, unfortunately, it has to be F1 because that's where the money
Hmm.
is and that's where the fan base is.
Yeah.
The only natural thing, and I was kind of discussing this with a couple of mates, the only thing that actually makes sense is they now follow on from this team going from being like underdog getting one win in a season to actually now then trying to transfer into like becoming a real contender, like going head to head with the likes of the McLarens
Yeah.
and the Mercedes of the world. And you basically have to follow Joshua Pierce. Is the only thing that makes sense. He's the
Hmm.
rookie driver. And then the one thing that I would love. Now, I'm a big fan of sports movies. I don't know if you guys have seen a movie called Hustle. It's like Adam Sandler. It's a basketball movie. If you
Oh yeah,
haven't,
yeah,
Hmm.
and you
Yeah.
like basketball, watch it. I really like that movie. I think it's really
I
good.
like
And I
that.
think they could follow a similar thing to that, where it's like they have Damson, but similar in the sense of obviously the main guy who plays that was a professional basketball player. He played for my team for the Raptors for a bit. He was shit, but played obviously for a lot of like Hernan Gomez is his name. He played for a lot of teams around the NBA. I think a cool thing they could do is actually try to bring in like a real F1 driver and go that route. Have like Damson alongside a real one and go that route. Because I think that was sick in Hustle. Hustle is like littered with NBA stars. I mean, the main antagonist is Anthony Edwards. It's like one of the greatest players in the league
Yeah.
currently to watch. And he's also quite a good actor in that. I think that would be
Hmm.
the best thing to do. But the question is, again,
Yeah.
how would you do that?
Last year,
Yeah.
last time when we had the F1 movie, that was the big concern from Red Bull because at the time they were the dominant team and many people
Mhm.
considered them the illegitimate champions of the 2021 season. So there
Yeah.
was a
Sure.
lot of hatred going to their way as well. So that was what they were worried about, that they would be portrayed as the villain. So I think to some extent, people like Max would be not very receptive to the idea of being featured in the movie much. But honestly, you could bring someone who's a few years out of F1 and still have him compete, and it would bring some of the action. And for us fans, it would be a good way to see them as well. So
Yeah,
moving
you
on to
get someone
the
out
yeah.
or like someone on a fringe team as well. Like I was thinking, like someone like a
Hmm.
Hulkenberg, I think would be so sick to have as like
Ooh.
he's also a quite a funny character, and when you see him in
Yeah.
media, he seems actually pretty good at it as well. Like he's obviously like a bit of a vet. By the time they get around to filming it, but that's what I was thinking. You get Joshua Pierce and another driver, and you follow that route where it becomes even more ingrained with F1 because you have like, real
Yeah.
drivers involved, and you actually have real scenes. I mean, Lewis is a producer, like in a world as well. I mean, I don't think Lewis could be an actor in that just because of he's so busy with Ferrari, but like he is
Uh,
like one of the lead producers on the movie, and he will be again for the second movie. So
yeah.
again, having something like that, I think would be sick.
I mean, he's going to be free in a couple of weeks anyway. So let's move on to the
Yeah.
livery rankings real quick. Before this episode started, I had both of my co-hosts here rank the liveries for the 11 cars, and I've compiled that list, and we've got the F1 point system applied to them. So we'll go from bottom to the top. Uh, Audi ended up at the bottom of the list, largely thanks to me putting them 11th. So,
Oh.
Quacke, you rated them at number 8. Neo had them at number 7. I put them at number 11, which is the clear outlier. So I'll get started with that. To me, this looks like a livery that does not merge together at all. It looks like two separate cars that have been put together. Like the front is obviously Mercedes or classic McLaren inspiration, but the back half also looks like a 2015 Alonso era McLaren on top. Like there's nothing that joins both of the segments together, and there's no like vivid sponsors on it that can have some extra color or add something to it. So for me, it looks like a very hollow livery. When it was just a concept car or when it was just a test livery, I was completely fine with it because they just need to get a car on track. But now that I have to see it across the whole year, I think I'm going to get bored quite quickly of it. So Neil, you can take the front on this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think one thing that I really didn't like about the Audi one more than anything is like, and something that I think Williams did quite well is when you talk about like integrating the sponsors in. I think that's when you get sort of some of your best. I think McLaren's a great example, right? With
Mhm.
Google Chrome, right? Like when they integrate the sponsor into towards the car, but you've just got Revolut just plastered on the side in just this name, right? It's just black already, and it's all on gray, I guess technically. When I look at it, it's like Revolut has some pretty decent colorways in terms of what their sponsors are like. You know, it naturally kind of leans towards like either your dark blue, but a lot of their cards are quite colored as well. So I feel like, you know, you could have done something where it's like you involve the sponsor into the color scheme and it makes it look kind of sick in a way. But yeah, for me, I don't know. I similar with like from like sports jerseys and everything, the same with the car, it's just too plain for me. I just don't, nothing for it's like stands out where it's like, oh, I love this because it's like super standout. I'm just gonna forget about it. Like it's like a very average kind of like silvery gray color, and then like you said, that like just like random bit of orange towards the back. I mean, even that as well is like, in a way it feels weird because like orange just isn't Audi's colors. Like why not lean more in towards like that kind of like heavy black and red that's been Audi in the past, that's been kind of known for them with that logo. It just feels very forgettable, very kind of average by my looks. And I'm just not really going to care about it. I'm not going to be looking at this
Yeah.
and be like, oh, it's sick to see this car going by. It's just sort of, for me, it's just like whatever, really.
Yeah, I can see Quack is seething, so get started, man.
I think. Look, okay, no, I agree that it's quite plain. It's quite boring. I think it would look
Mhm.
better honestly if it had more sponsors or if you could integrate them better. Yeah, just
Yeah.
have a bit more decoration on there. But it's not bad. Like there are liveries I've ranked below this that I think are genuinely worse, and that's just
Mhm.
like just not just like they tried to do more stuff. That's cool. Like Audi should have tried, but they just failed. They just looked bad in my opinion. So for that it's like it's fine. But also it does. I think they have tried to play. For some reason they've tried to play on the like vintage McLaren kind of look, which is like the
Yeah.
Vodafone Mercedes McLaren like
Mhm.
at that point when they were the silver team, which is, I mean, look, regardless of what you think of why they might have done that, because they're playing on the nostalgia of an entirely different team. That's kind of weird, but it looks good. Like I think it looks good. So yeah, I could have put them higher, but like, no, I think they did fine. It's just it's a bit dull, but it's clean, it's sleek. I like it that way.
Yeah. Next up on our list is Alpine, tying Audi for last place. Uh, Both of you guys put Alpine at number 11. Meanwhile, I had it all the way up at fifth. So, Quack,
What?
Wow.
what's your take on the Alpine? Why is it the worst car for this season?
It just like the blue. It's the wrong kind of blue and the wrong kind of pink. It's pretty much all of it. To be honest, it just looks super weird. I don't like what they did over the nose with how it's gonna look like pink from the front and then it's blue from the rest of the sides. I think I know that people say this like, okay, so BWT have such a strong connection with the color pink. I'm sure they pay a
Yeah.
lot of money for the car to be slightly pink. And
Mhm.
Alpine. So then some people say, well, but Alpine as a brand have always been this sort of Alpine blue. Like it's like the Ferrari red. Every Alpine car in existence has always been blue. Because Alpine does kind of have a rich history as a brand. And then it's like, I think you just have to decide. You have to pick one. Do you want to be a pink car? Or do you want to be a blue car? And at this point, it's just some sort of middle ground, which I think has always just looked awful. I think pick. You can have some pink accents if you pick the blue. You can have some blue accents if you pick the pink. But if you're gonna try, this is almost a 50-50 split, and to me, it just looks stupid. It just looks really dumb.
Would you prefer something like the classic Racing Point liveries instead?
Oh, I love the Racing Points. They were super. I love the pink. I love the pink on that. But at least they decided. Like I even liked
Mhm.
like I actually really even liked the Aston Martin, which had some pink accents. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
That's super. But just pick one. Like one of them has to be the main one. You can't be blue. Blue and pink is not a color combination I think works whatsoever. So I don't know. It's overall it's a nice design. If it was just a bit different, like if it was different colors, I would be super happy because that's fine. But
Okay.
those two colors
Yeah.
clash so poorly, and I just don't like it.
Neo, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree. I just don't like the color. I think it's two bold colors that don't work well together at all. And kind of similar to what you're saying, where I think like you should lean in towards it being like, I think what they should have done is actually similar to what we see kind of like with the Aston Martin, where it's like the Aston Martin is obviously like predominantly green with those highlights. That's what they should have done, rather than it being like kind of like a half and half or like a 60-40 of like blue to pink. It should be like predominantly blue and that like a nice kind of like chromatic blue, and then have the accents of the pink and what Aston Martin's got, where it's got like kind of like that kind of more darker green green color, and it's got the accents of the slight light green and the accents of the black on kind of the base as well. I think that works quite well. But when you look at the likes of the Alpine, I just think it looks so ugly. I really don't like that. I've never liked that color scheme having the pink and the blue. And yeah, I guess I understand with kind of the sponsor being pink, but I just really think for me it's like the worst by kind of a country mile. I think they should be more predominantly blue with accents along the way, and then it would kind of mesh a little bit more. But it does feel like they've been like, okay, we are going to go with the blue. However, because of the sponsor, we've got to make some stuff pink. So we're like, we'll go for the halo pink, and we'll go for like, like the some of the wings pink. I don't know. I don't like it for me. It's always been kind of the worst color. And then also even weirder that I find kind of strange is like you've got like that one sponsor, the BWC being pink, and everything else is white. So then it's like at the same time, it's like I want a bit of consistency across rather than just this one glaring 3 letters in pink, and everything else is like a pretty bland white sponsor logo. For me, I think this is the worst one. I really don't like it.
Yeah, I guess it's down to me to defend Alpine once again. The reason why Alpine is so high in my list is that last year I already thought their livery was okay. And this year they've changed the side pods around from blue on pink to pink on blue. And honestly, I like that the side profile of the car as a whole, it looks pretty cohesive now to me. I agree that there's a bit too much pink on it. I would like for them to go back to the 2021 Alpine livery where it was the French tricolor. But since that's not going to happen, honestly, this looks good. And more importantly than that for me, the other cars that I've rated lower, they just have a boring livery for me, where even if the color scheme that they have chosen works, the carbon fiber that's around it doesn't gel with it as much, which we'll get on to just next. Because next up we have Ferrari. This time it's Quacke who's more of the outlier. He had it down in ninth. Neo had it all the way up in fifth, and I was in the middle with seventh. So, Neo, what's your take on this? Why are you so high on the Ferrari?
Don't get me wrong. I don't think this one is like fantastic. I don't think it's like, I don't love it, but I think kind of one of the reasons I put it a little bit higher is just because I've always been across, again, all sports and esports and stuff. I've been a bit of a hater of just like plain black and kind of these like, I think a lot of like teams in terms of whether it's the jerseys or I guess in this sense the liveries are just kind of black or gray. I put a lot of them towards the bottom for me. I just like that there's a bit of a pop of color. I will say one of the things I don't like about this is like I think it looks old school, but not in a cool way, if that makes sense, with the Ferrari logo, the Ferrari livery. I would say like I like what they were trying to do. I just don't think it's pulled off. Yeah. Also, again, not really their fault just because of the sponsor. I really don't like the HP just being like a random like flash of blue on it. I just think it looks a little bit strange, but for the most part, I think I put it as high as I put it just because I value color in F1 cars a lot higher. The issue that I'm going to have is that if we're looking at like a pack of cars driving through, and so many of them are like silver or gray, I'm just going to be like, having to like really think like, well, okay, what car is this as they come through. With Ferrari, it does stand out in that way, so I'll give them that kind of like credit in a sense, but I don't love it, don't get me wrong. I just think it's better than because it's not completely plain, but I definitely think it could have come across a lot nicer. I think it looks for me a little bit too old school. I've liked a bit more of a modern approach in it. It's just sort of like that red base with that kind of the white on the top, and that HP logo is quite glaring in the way it stands out. But again, I like it because it's just got a bit of a pop of color.
Yeah, Quacke, you're on the opposite side of the spectrum there. What's your take?
I like the red. They've gone for a better red than they have had in the past. I don't really like the darker red, like maroon. It was supposed to look a bit more older, but I prefer this. It's a racing car. I think it should be like hot colors. It should be, standing out like this. I don't like the random white thing around the cockpit. I don't like that. I think I agree it looks a bit old school in a way, but that's just not for me. And I think the blue is just awful. HP. Again, it's not their fault. HP have that blue color, and again, like, I'm sure they pay a lot of money for it to be blue. Teams you could just say, no, we want it to be black and white. Like, we want it to be just, a base color. Because teams can do that. They can demand that. And in my opinion, I don't care how much money they threw at it all. They should have said that. Like, they should have had HP, you can't have the blue on it. Just go with red, white, or black, and then we're good. But no. Overall, it's more so the shape of it. I feel like the shaping is weird, and with the white thing, I think it just looks a bit awkward.
Yeah, I think the white is harkening back to the Lauda era, which always had the white cockpit around. And even when you look at the Schumacher era Ferraris, they always had a hint of white to them. And honestly, to me, the white doesn't look like the problem. In fact, I would have wanted them to put the wings and both of the wings to the white color as well, because right now they are black and it just adds a third element that I don't think the Ferrari needed at all. It looks out of place to me, and it even makes the HP blue stand out even more. Like compared to last year's wings, which were not the greatest design in themselves, this somehow looks worse.
Yeah, I, I,
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan.
Mm. Next up, Nyoka, it's your turn to go wild. Aston Martin was second on your ranking, but ended up down in eighth for the overall list. How do you
I
justify ranking the same exact livery so high?
What honestly, the reason why I put it so high is kind of what I was saying earlier. I personally, this is like one of my favorite colors just in general. So this is kind of why I lean towards Aston Martin. Aston Martin is also my favorite car brand just in general. Like if I, my dream
Mm-hmm.
car would probably be some sort of Aston Martin Vantage. If I could ever like, make enough money to get a car, it would probably be some sort of Aston Martin, and it would be in this color. So that's kind of where I think it's just a bit of a personal bias. Like I love the color as a whole, that kind of like slightly like foresty green that they've got. The one thing I will like happily like come back on is I don't like the way in which they've got that like slight lime green accent. I just kind of think it's unnecessary. For if anything, for me, it feels kind of pointless. And also, like you're mentioning, it's so similar to what we saw
Yeah.
last year. But I'm excited to kind of see what this car will bring as a whole throughout the season. We're kind of getting towards the car itself, but when it comes towards this delivery itself, I just like this color a lot. I think it's like again another one of those where I talk about like I like pops of color and I like it standing out. And for me, with how many kind of like plain cars I think we've got this year, it's one of the few that actually kind of just goes out of its way to stand out. Because Aston Martin very easily could have gone like a lot of their like just standard cars are that they sell, they're like silver, black, and then they kind of lean on that. They
Yeah.
could have very easily gone that way themselves, and none of their sponsors require colors in a way, and they could have easily kind of like gone for a much plainer car. I just like it because they've actually been a bit bold of it and continued to kind of keep this like predominant color base of being this sort of foresty kind of slightly dark turquoise color that they've got. I'm just a fan of the color more than anything.
Me and Quacke both had the Aston down in ninth and 10th, respectively. So I'll take it first this time. Honestly, to me, it somehow looks worse than the last one. Like, I agree the color is fantastic. The British racing green is always going to be a classic. But it just doesn't look very good to me as a complete package. Like, even on the side pods, they are trying to overlap some of the green with some of the black. There's a weird cutout around the sponsor logos. All that just makes it look either incomplete or somehow missing some features. So, Quacky, do you agree with that?
Yeah, it just looks. I think it just looks empty, and I think I was also just upset
Mm-hmm.
because they were the last team to drop their livery reveal, and I felt like I was sitting and just waiting. What were Aston Martin gonna do? Like a new era, like there's a lot of change happening in the team. They have new personnel, they have Newey, they have everything. Oh well, maybe they try something new, and it's just like great color.
Yeah.
It's a great color. That's about everything I can have to say for it though, because it's just something about the way over the engine cover it looks super empty to me, and it just looks like something should have been here. Some sponsor should have been bigger. Maybe they should have put some sort of design there, but it's just plain green, and it's a great green, but it's just a bit boring, and it might like I don't know. It feels like looking at a. I get this is their color. Maybe I am slightly too harsh, but I do just felt like it was a bit boring, and I did feel like
Yeah.
what was I waiting for when they dropped it this late?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dropping this livery this late made no sense. You could have dropped this last season. It wouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah.
So next up, we have a team that usually is more all over the place with their driver lineups, but this time they're all over the place with their rankings in our lists. Racing Bulls is number 7 with just 28 points across the list. Last year's Racing Bull was by far my favorite car, and this year somehow, despite me preferring the blue segments that they have added to the back with the Ford partnership, it looks worse to me. Like the front, I think they just needed a bigger canvas to make the white really pop. Last year's car on the bigger size it looked good. This year it somehow looks incomplete with all the carbon fiber in front of it. Neo, you had them down in 9, so I guess you agree with the down turn for their livery compared to last year.
Yeah, again, I think kind of like I think this has always been a bit of a problem with racing bulls for me because obviously you've got that Red Bull logo, which is such a bright kind of pop of yellow and red, but then trying to mesh it with then what is a pretty basic-ish kind of white base with a bit of blue here and there. It just feels like kind of a lot going on, but like not like synchronized very well. That's kind of always the issue I have with racing bulls. I don't hate it by any means, and again, it's nice that I see it with again a bit of color, but I always just feel like the issue with racing bulls is it's so much going on that it's like a bit of an eyesore at times. Granted, it's easy to spot where that car's always going to be when you're watching a race, but that's always the problem I kind of have with it. I just feel like it does become like it's just a little bit too much of a mishmash for me of like so many colors and so many things going on at the same time that I don't always kind of love it. I think like you've probably I want them to kind of find a nicer way to integrate kind of the Red Bull logo in its way into the car rather than being like, okay, white base, blue hints, a bit of black here and there, and then just like bang, yellow and red, just like plastered wherever they can find a gap. Like that's always my issue. It just feels like it's like this is the base, and then we've got to find space for this logo. We'll just put it towards the back and maybe on the nose a little bit, and we'll go with that. That's always my issue with it. I just feel like it's never integrated well. It feels like a bit of an afterthought in a way that I've always had with this logo. There's nicer ways for it to be put on, but I don't know. I don't hate it, but it's just not always one that I love. It just feels like there's so much going on.
Okay, you had them at number 2.
Yeah, I think this is amazing. I think they picked 3 great colors. I think they're balanced very nicely. I think the Ford accent is super nice. I think the Red Bull logo is always gonna look good wherever it is. Like the yellow nose is great. The Red Bulls, it's great. Over the air intake as well. Over the airbox, it's great. And then the blue accent, honestly, it's slightly worse than last year's livery. Last year's livery was the best livery on the grid. But I think this is really good. And I don't think there's too much going on. I think it's like a perfect balance. This looks like a good race car. And it's like, yeah. And I liked it even more when I saw it on track. Like, I'm looking at the renders now, but when I saw it on track during the shakedown, I was like, yeah, this is a good looking car. But mostly, I think they just picked 4 good colors, and they have them where they should be, in my opinion.
I think on the topic of the Red Bulls logo, I mostly agree. I think it's just a mirror of the senior team's branding and just changing the base color from blue to white. But to me, the biggest issue is if you look at the front view of the car, you don't see any of the blue. You just see white and a ton of black. So that is where the car falls a bit short for me. But overall, I think it would have been a really good car if they had somehow managed to change the color of carbon fiber, which obviously they can't. Uh, Next up, we have the new entrant onto the grid, Cadillac. Neo, you had them down all the way in 10th. Me and Quacke both put them on the podium with third. So this time you are up for brutally murdering this team.
I would say the thing that for me that was the most annoying thing is like Cadillac coming in towards this year. It like seems like I was like really excited for what they can bring because Cadillac's got like a lot of classic kind of colors. I think throughout its past. I think in terms of like the cars specifically, and they've had a lot of really cool designs in terms of their normal cars. And then the issue is that I just think it's like slightly plain. That's like my only issue is like they have so many variations of where they can lead. Like I even as much as like I don't like hate it. I think in a way like there is bits that I think are kind of cool about it, but again, it comes back to being quite plain. Like the Cadillac logo in the past has actually had some quite cool colorways that they've gone with it, or they could lean really heavily in towards like kind of like a more like American theme behind it, of course, which is quite synonymous with Cadillac as a whole. But no issue. It comes back to what I was saying earlier. I just think just slightly too plain for me is like my main thing more than anything. It's just like I felt like they had so many opportunities to be like really kind of flashy with this with the way Cadillac kind of you'd expect them to be just because being as where they're from, right? But instead it's just like very much like it's like they've gone for just a pretty plain sleek car. And sure, I think as a whole I don't like despise it, but it comes back to what I've been saying. I just think it's a little bit plain for me. I also think like it's one of those where it just feels like there were so many opportunities for them to integrate maybe the sponsors in a little bit better with the color. I will say one thing I do like is I also like the tires thing on the side look really cool. I think that's something that I think some F1 teams don't do very well, where it can just be like an afterthought with the design of the tires. In that case, I like it, but just a bit of a kind of plain white and black, right? I think for me it becomes a bit where it's like I just wanted a little bit more, again, like pop of color. I think it's like where my bias comes in, like these plain black, these plain white cars that are a little bit kind of basic in a sense. There's so many opportunities for color that they just didn't go for.
Would you have preferred like a gold livery?
I'd be sick, and also different. I think is another thing, right? Again,
Yeah.
comes back to where I was saying, like, I like again with Aston Martin, I like fighting that battle there for them. Is like it's just different. I like teams kind of having, in a way, and again, I know I hated on Alpine for this, right? Because our car is ugly, but at least at the very least, they know their colorway, they know their scheme. Alpine have always been historically blue. I want Cadillac to lean into something like that, like pick a color and make, like, we are coming into F1. You want to make a statement here. I don't hate the car. I just think, unfortunately, that it is just slightly basic for me. That's the only thing, the only issue I have with it. There's so many opportunities to like pick a color and make this Cadillac's color for F1, but instead it's just like black and white. I know their logo currently is black and white, but in the past they've had a variety of different colors with it. I would have just liked something a little bit more standout-ish and just kind of be brazen with it, right? Pick a color and say like this, we're owning this color from now on. The way that McLaren own that papaya, right? Own a color like that rather than black and white, which they're never going to take a kind of a claim on.
Quacke split livery. You think it looks pretty cool?
I think it's a really good color choice. I think it's really cool. It looks cool from both sides. The only thing is I never really think split liveries look that good in general, unfortunately. So I think in practice it might not look that great in my opinion, but we'll no, but I do like it. I also realize that like a black and white car, this is gonna look a lot better in the renders when they announce it than it actually does look on track, and I think they have run this in the test
That's true, yeah.
as well. But like
I think they did for the Bahrain one, and
Oh.
from what I could see, it looked better to me on track. Like initially, my reaction was split livery. It's BR Honda callback from 2003, sorry, 1990 something. But my initial thought was that they are just going to go down to 11th on my list, and I will never think about it again because the split livery can't work. But so far, the two sides of the livery blend well because, like Neo said, it's kind of a basic color with both sides. But the blending of them, I think it looks pretty cool. So that's why I had them all the way up in third.
yeah,
Also, I would just say as well, in the past,
Mm-hmm.
Cadillac have like really owned that like red and gold together, right?
Yeah.
That's like their previous logo before they got this kind of like monochrome makeover was this gold and red. I would have liked them to go for that. Like when I think of like classic Cadillacs, I'm talking, proper old school ones. Like they're like, like 50s and 60s like sedans and stuff that they'd have. Like they were always this kind of like very classic. Now I think obviously like going red, you can't have that, right? Because of Ferrari, but you could have gone the other way with gold with red. So like gold being your primary logo or your primary color with a bit of red accents, something like that, and kind of gone with a bit of a callback to history. But unfortunately, they've gone for like what is their current logo, which is just kind of black and white, rather than what I think the historic one, which I think looks cooler for me.
yeah, they run a red and gold in WEC, I believe, which is
Okay.
actually very good, very good looking car. So that's actually like valid, and it's also similar for Audi. It's like you had a set of colors that you could have run instead. Why aren't you running those? So that's fair.
Yeah, next up, we have possibly the most boring livery of this season. McLaren has made it to the top five. For the list, Neo had them in third on a podium position, Quack had them fifth, and I myself put them down in eighth. So, Neo, podium position for McLaren. Do you like the livery? The papaya works for you?
Yeah, again, it comes back to what I was saying. Like they know their color, right? They know what is their like just their brand, and I kind of love owning it, right? You've kind of realized that like this is what I mean. It's become so synonymous with McLaren as a whole. It's like everyone talking about like the papaya, right? But like credit to them for just sticking with it. Another thing I'll always like kind of praise them for. I love the integration of like the chrome logo into all the tires. I think that's really sick. I think that looks really cool. I also think it looks awesome when driving. I was watching a bunch of the testing, and it still remains to be like for me like kind of the coolest tire sets that they've got, like having that kind of, because when they're obviously going fast, that blend of colors that you see, kind of like that rainbow effect that it has, is so sick for me. So I always like it just because they know their color scheme, they know their identity in a sense, and they just own it. And sure, it's like it's not like a massive change in a sense, and you can maybe even make arguments as well that they could have even gone more orange. Like, it is kind of a decent blend of like orange and black. They actually could have gone even more so, but I just like it. They know their identity, they know their color scheme, and they stick with it, and they really make sure that it stands out. And like it, there's no two ways about it. Like the same thing with like the Ferrari and with the Aston Martin, the McLaren. Like you will never miss that car. It always stands out. You always know where it is, and it doesn't blend the same way that like an Audi will blend in, or a Cadillac will blend in, or just because of how kind of basic in a sense it is. So I always just like it because they are doing something a little different, right? They're owning their color scheme and they're sticking with it. And I wish kind of more teams would do that, like the Audis, like the Cadillacs.
Quack, what's your take?
I really like it. I think it's basic. It's basic in the sense that this is what they always run, but it is just like kind of a proven concept, which is why it ends up being where it is for me. I like the diagonal. I think this is not really talked about that much, but they have this black diagonal, which it's quite obviously a nod to the old Marlboro McLaren liveries. Not a lot of people talk about it as far as I can see, but it's like the 90s McLarens, and those look so good with the diagonal stripe. To me, it's quite obvious. To me, it's always felt quite obvious that that's like a nod to that, just in a more of a modern take, and I really like that. I think it's very well done. It's like a perfect blend of you're calling back in one way, but you also have your new identity in another way. It's nice, but in general, it's just not. It doesn't stand out that much in terms of like how good do I think this is. I think they have their brand. It works for them. It's not quite my favorite. Usually orange is a color I really like, but it's in this case it's not my favorite.
Yeah, I think the orange to me looks good. Papaya Rules has made it more popular than it ever should have been as well. But the issue that I had run into is that if you look at the top of the side pod, they had every chance to just continue the orange down it, and that would give it even more color. And they chose to break the orange segments up all the way. So unless you're looking at perfectly dead on from the side, there always seems to be a lack of orange. If they had just committed to it fully, like some of the designs they have in Formula E, for example, those look sick to me. But as it stands, it kind of looks even less orange than last year, even if the overall paint percentage might be higher.
That's a
All
good
right,
point, to be
moving
honest.
on. Yeah, moving on to Williams then. We are hoping that they would make a top four push this season with their car itself, but for the liveries, it's largely Neokai's number one ranking for them that is carrying them this high. So, Neokai, what do you love about the Williams livery? And talk about the testing livery that you ranked even higher.
Oh man, I love that testing livery. I think it's so nice. I really, really like it. I think it's so cool. Like if they could have had that like all the way throughout, I would have been, like ride or die with it. But again, like it comes back to what I was saying about like where we talk about teams owning their colors and owning like what is sort of like their branding in a sense. And that's kind of why I like Williams here for them. It's like they've come in towards this season with what I think is like a really nice sleek car, like the 2026 livery. The one thing I will say I don't like is like on kind of like the bottom part of the side pod where it's like that light blue into the white. I think there's like probably would have been a nicer way to blend those together rather than it being kind of like a hard cut in a sense. But as a whole, I like the car a lot. I think that kind of like that sleek blue. One thing that I really loved more than anything, really, why I love this car, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is like the integration of sponsors. That Duracell sponsor on the
Yeah.
intake is, for me, I think is genius. I think that is so pretty. I think it's so sick. I really, really love that. Like that's like something where again, like teams should be taking like notes on like a really cool way, because I mean it does look like the Duracell battery. Like it's such a sick way of like integrating it. You've got the sponsor, a partner sponsor who obviously have a very predominant kind of placement, and you then added that on top of it. The one thing I will say is like that testing livery where it's like, so obviously because the main one's like blue with bits of white, bits of light blue. Their testing livery where it's like predominantly white with like kind of the light blue, it reminds me of like sort of like snowy mountains in a sense. I thought that was sick, and I thought the wheels on it was super sick as well. That for me is like my favorite livery that I've seen so far, like that testing one. But for their 2026 livery, I'm just a fan just because of like nice distinct colors. The only thing I don't like is that side pod bit with the kind of the light blue and the white. But that just because that Duracell like integration, I think that's super genius. I love that. It just looks like a battery. It's sick. I think it's really well integrated. I wish in a sense they maybe had a little bit more like rather than that adding that light blue kind of for whatever reason, just stuck with the dark blue all the way throughout with like something they could have even like flipped the testing livery where it was like dark blue base with like kind of that white as sort of what looks like kind of like they could have designed / mountains alongside of it. I'd like that. They could have like kind of gone for like a flipped design on the testing livery, but regardless, for me, this one I think is super cool. I just think it stands out. I think it's nice. I'm a fan. I wish they could go for that testing livery the whole way because that's sick. But yeah, I'm a fan of this one.
Yeah, I'll take the counter argument then because I had them all the way down in 10th. I think this 2026 livery honestly looks like shit. Like last season they had a pretty amazing looking car with the deep blue all the way throughout, but the two light colors on the side pod just kills it for me. Like neither of those colors gel with the rest of the car. Neither of those colors gel with the rest of the side pod even, and it kind of looks like an eyesore. On top of that, the Barclays blue is also on the rear wing, which honestly, when we get the shots from the cars following them, that's going to make it look even worse for me. And on top of that, like you mentioned, the testing livery, that is a sick design. And to me, they have left a lot of carbon fiber exposed underneath the side pod for that design. Compare that to the one that they have actually chosen for the season, that white for the Komatsu section of the sidepod extends down even further. And it makes the whole car look a lot more bulky to me than the original renders did.
I really like the Barclays blue. I really like it. I think it's gonna be cool. I think the cool thing, the Duracell thing is super cool. It's always been
Yeah.
something I really like. It usually like when there's a sponsor which just isn't really cohesive with the rest of the livery, then I'm sort of like, oh, that's pretty bad. But in this, they've done it by absolutely the best way possible by just leaning into it. I really like the Williams blue on one hand, and then the Barclays blue on like the way those work together. And they have the Gulf sponsor. Maybe they could have done something fun with that, but like Gulf just that's sort of the Gulf blue color almost. You can do some fun things here. Maybe they could have done something better, or we have some special one-offs. But no, I really like it. I like the blue and the darker and the lighter blue, and I like that. The testing livery, like a good testing livery, always looks really good. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah.
I would say also I kind of like how they let people vote on it. Like,
Oh yeah.
like I just like that aspect of it. Like I think that's kind of cool. Like these are your fans, and these are people who obviously are going to be supporting you all the way throughout. You want them to have a say, and I like that they're one of those teams that really do give people a say. And as I saw some of the other ones that went up for contention. This was definitely the better of the bunch. There was a few others in that vote.
Yeah.
I think it was like 6 in total. I think like 3 of them are really, really awful. So like I as designs go, I think this was definitely up there. And it was I forget the guy's name now. The guy designed it, Ed something or other, who designed it. But I like what he did with this one personally.
Yeah, it's Edward Scott. I think I saw his name pop up in some of the discussions for the Duracell
Yeah.
design as well. Yeah,
Yes.
overall, Williams get a fourth place by swinging all over the place. And then we have the big three. Red Bull is number three. And that is quite surprising, honestly, because nobody had them on their podium. So they have sneaked in just by collecting a good number of points throughout. Me and Quack both placed them on the fourth position, and Neo had them sixth. So pretty decent result for Red Bull. Neo Guy, what's your take on the Red Bull design?
Yeah, it's one of those for me. Like, I don't like hate it by any means. I think of Red Bull, they again similar thing where like they kind of know where they're at now. In terms of the design, I kind of like especially comparatively. I was speaking about how I don't like that kind of like on the racing bulls, where it's like that integrating kind of the logo, that kind of yellow and red into it. But I think it works better with a black base than a white base. I think kind of like generally speaking, like red and black, which is what something like an Audi should have gone for, right? Is a kind of a cool look for me. I think maybe the only thing I would have liked is potentially a little bit more done for the wheels. You got that kind of like a blue kind of like strip around the edge,
Yeah.
but that's sort of like the only thing that really works for them. Like works against them. Maybe I would have liked to potentially something a bit more like a yellow or a red, right? And kind of lent in towards that Red Bull logo a bit. But as a whole, I like this one. I think it's kind of sleek. I think it's kind of clean. I would have liked probably a little bit more color, and I probably would have put it higher just because it being that black base and me having that sort of like hatred to kind of these plain cars in a sense. But because of the logo itself, it does make it pop a little bit more.
Quack, has the time they spent on track dulled the ranking down a bit because the initial renders that they released looked really vivid with the blue that they used.
Yeah, I don't really mind that, to be honest, because the black also looks really good. And honestly, on track, it's looked kind of like all the past Red Bulls, and I don't mind that because
Yeah.
that was always a really good livery. There was a reason why they didn't move away from it, and I didn't think they would this year either. But I think they sort of stuck with a proven concept, just done it in a bit of a different way, where
Yeah.
they can incorporate the Ford accent once again, just like Racing Bulls, and it's done in a really cool way. I usually I was a big fan of it being like, honestly, seeing it on track has honestly improved it in one way because I was a big fan of the matte color they used to have before. But like,
Mm-hmm.
I really like the shiny Red Bull now that I've seen it on
Yeah.
track as well. That's even better. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. It's a classic.
Yep.
It's a new take on a classic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Particularly when you see it in Bahrain when the sun is hitting it just right, it just pops so amazingly that I don't think, honestly, when it's a dusky track, like if Max does a good pole lap on Austin, that car is going to look absolutely sick.
Yeah.
And then finally, we have the top two. Mercedes is number two, thanks to me putting them at that position in my list. Quacke, you are the outlier on this one with the sixth ranking for the team. What do you dislike about this car, in fact?
It looks like a little bit too much to me. Again, I feel like they've gone for a bit too much black, and but then they've also really tried to do the silver, and they've done the stripes on top of
Mm-hmm.
the side pod. I don't know. They kind of just pick one. It's one of those where again I feel like you sort of need to pick one of these. It looks great. Like the two colors complement each other. I would have preferred if they went for more silver or more black. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but other than that, it's also a classic. It's always gonna look pretty good. So
Neo, you got a rebuttal for that?
No, I mean, honestly, I kind of agree. I think it feels like they were slightly indecisive about should we make this predominantly black or predominantly silver. I would have loved if they'd just gone for that silver. The one thing
Mm-hmm.
and that would have made me put this even higher is if they actually had more of that light blue on it. If they had if it was like a silver and light blue, I would have loved this
ooh,
car. But I think generally for
yeah,
me, it feels quite sleek. I get what you mean in terms of it being a little bit too much, though. I kind of agree. I think with like the way this Mercedes car is sort of made, they've got so many sponsors to try and integrate in so many different
Yeah.
positions that it does feel a little bit like, a bit of a walking billboard, as with kind of a lot of cars, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel like it's synonymous with the car itself or the livery itself. But I agree. I feel like, to make this just like, I would have put this so much higher if we could have had it just like, an all silver with a lot more light blue. I would have loved it. It had opportunities to be really quite poppy as a car. And it's okay. Like I'm nothing against it. I think it's definitely one of the sleeker ones. If you're going to go for a bit more of a kind of a darker color scheme, as a lot of the cars have this year, I think it's definitely one of the better ones. Just even because of
Yeah.
that light blue accent, I would have just loved a little bit more silver, a little bit more light blue, and it would have been brilliant for me.
Yeah, for me, this car really stands out with how good it looks on the actual car itself. Like when you look at the car on track, the entire machine just looks so sleek and so streamlined that it just invokes something in me that makes me think this car is going to be fast, even if it's stood on the side of the track. And plus, they called it the AMG stripes on top of the engine cover.
Mhm.
Whatever those are, I honestly like it. Like the top-down shot of the car in particular, it looks really cool. And with the Petronas, like you mentioned, the light blue that they use, it always looks pretty cool. Honestly, using a bit more of it, maybe for a one-off livery, could also work. But I like that they did not stick with a single swoosh this time. It actually has some texture to it. It has some variety to it by going down with the side pod as well. So all that combined to make it a pretty exciting livery for me this time, even if I classically don't love the Mercedes as much because of the dark cars that you have mentioned. Finally, this might be a bit of a shocker for Neo. Quack and I both put Haas on top, so they obviously won the entire thing. uh, Neo, you had them down in eighth. What is your take on the Toyota inspired Haas livery?
Yeah, again, I think for me, it's like I don't hate the Haas livery by any means, but I just want, I keep saying it, like a little bit more color. They could have let more in towards that
Yeah.
red for me. Like, I think even like something as small as on that side part where it says Haas, like having that in red, I think would have been cool. Like, I like what they've kind of gone with the GR on top, having that kind of like one being what the G being black and
Mm-hmm.
the R being red. I like kind of things like that where it's like they've obviously got this sort of like color scheme of like the red, white, and black, right? But I probably actually just would have liked a little bit more red rather than it being like a pure accent, actually having a bit of a heavier lean into it, like a bit more on the side pods, even a little bit more of a red on towards the wing because they've got on one of the logos on the wing of being red. I think you just lean a bit more into it for me, but I don't hate it by any means. But I always will have this bias for more colorful cars in a sense, and
Mm-hmm.
I would have just liked a bit more red. I like what they got with the wing at the back. With that's all in red, I would have maybe liked a bit more of that on like the side pods, for example, just to have like a bit more of a kind of a pop of color.
Yeah, Quacky, you had quite a visceral reaction to him putting it down in eighth. What do you love about the Haas car?
I think it's just perfect. White cars are great. The Haas logo looks great. The GR logo, like they fit really well together. And honestly, this just looks like a race car to me. That's honestly what I
Yeah.
felt when I saw it. I was like, that car looks like it's gonna be the fastest car of the season. Just like on the livery alone, looks like it's gonna be like that. And it just really looks like a race car. It looks like it's like like aggressive and sleek, and it just looks like a classic race car in the way
Yeah.
modern race cars look, and that's just something I like. There's something about the logos as well, how they really fit into that and really lean into it with the GR and the Haas, which is really the way the letters are shaped. I can't really explain it, but the way the letters
Yeah.
are shaped just really accentuates it, and yeah, it's just super clean.
Yeah, I agree. Like honestly, last year's Haas looked pretty bad to me with all the exposed carbon fiber that they were using. Even the side pods had mostly carbon fiber with just the white Haas on top. This year they've gone all white for the entire car. It has very little of the carbon fiber color anymore, and the red elements that they've used, I think it's been done quite tastefully. It's similar to the Petronas red, Petronas blue on the Mercedes, where they've used it for certain swooshes and certain flourishes. But on the whole, it's more of a white car. So I think that blends pretty nicely. Yeah, you could have a bit more red on it. It would look flashier on the track, but this looks really clean and sleek. Like I said, it looks like a good race car, even if it ends up not being that fast.
Yeah.
And that's the livery ranking done. We can finally get into the Bahrain test then.
This is gonna be a long one.
1 hour into, yeah. So the Bahrain test concluded this week, the first of two tests actually, and we have had a lot of running on track, a lot of results from it, and honestly, pretty exciting to watch these cars on track. Uh, so we'll start with the car everyone considered the leader for this year from the Barcelona test. After a flawless test in Spain, the team was sounding the warning alarms from day one itself. Toto Wolff said that they aren't the benchmark anymore and instead was pointing to Red Bull's faster deployment on the straights. He even said that the Red Bull might be 1 second faster across the lap. Do you guys believe that? Neo, let's start with you. Do you think the Red Bull is faster than the Mercedes now?
Yeah, I mean, I watched bits of kind of what I guess like the breakdowns from the Barcelona shakedown, and of course a bit of that testing as well. It just looks really solid. I mean, they got so many laps under their belt as well. I think it's like 670 laps that the Red Bull and the Racing Bulls got, and it looks like a really good car. I mean, there's very little issues, and you can even see as well, like not only that, but you've got kind of like how Joel talking about like how this feels like a car that you can really win in. I mean, that's like a really positive sign. This is a guy who obviously had a pretty decent year last year as a whole, especially kind of coming in towards the season and kind of where he was kind of sitting and starting a lot of races, and now coming in towards this team. I really like what I see from it, and I actually think it has the potential if they can kind of gel that team together and find a way, I guess, also to continue kind of making Max flourish. But what we saw from Max at the tail end of last season, heading in towards now what we've seen in testing, for me, Red Bull look like they're on top. It looks like this is a team that have a lot under their legs, and it seems like it's going to be quite a punchy season for them. Right, they've got two very aggressive drivers now who are going to be really gunning for a lot of titles, and a lot of race wins, and yeah, it makes it quite exciting. From what I saw from testing, it looks so quick, and the fact that you kind of like look across the grid and all these kind of intos that we're seeing, basically everyone's like shitting themselves at the
Yeah.
Red Bull. That can only be a positive sign. I think most teams, if not all teams, basically agreed that it looked incredibly good, right? You know, people were talking about like kind of that power train as well. Like, I love what I saw coming through from Red Bull. They look
Yeah.
super scary. If the drivers can mesh well together and find ways to be both similarly quite aggressive, this could be a really good year for Red Bull once again, especially
I
with
mean,
how well
everyone,
last year
yeah.
ended.
Everyone is agreeing on Red Bull being the fastest, but Quacke, Red Bull themselves are saying that Mercedes are probably sandbagging since they have a F1 commission meeting this week on Wednesday to discuss the compression ratio changes that we have talked to death about already. So, what are your take on could the team be sandbagging an entire test just to get a vote passed through?
I mean, no, I don't think that's what they're doing. Um, I think genuinely the Red Bull is very quick. I think the Red Bull is um it's looking quick. I think if anyone's sandbagging, I think it might be Red Bull. I think it might be that they have the engine turned down a little bit
Okay.
because of the reliability they've managed to get with a new engine. Like last year, I was listening to I was listening back to when Helmut Marko went on Beyond the Grid, just because I'm that far behind in my backlog of podcasts to listen to. And he basically said, like, no, we are a new engine manufacturer. This is the first time we're running our own engine, basically. For us, a win next year would be to just be competitive with a completely new engine manufacturer, which obviously isn't entirely true because it is a lot of Honda, etc., etc. But that's for them to have this good reliability and for them to be still be this quick, all things considered, is pretty crazy. When you consider that they are a new engine manufacturer, and when you consider that they built their own engine for the first time, basically, that's pretty damn impressive. I think genuinely they might be even quicker than this in reality when we get to Australia. So like they've already like on what is this, the third day, Max runs the most laps out of anyone, 136, and he's still the second fastest that day with a pretty competitive time. Like I think genuinely they might be the ones who are sandbagging, and we don't know how it's all going to shake out with the compression ratios either.
Yeah, Neo, I'll throw this question to you. We have obviously talked a lot about the compression ratio trick, but more abstractly, should the F1 be banning creative rule understandings if it doesn't violate the rules as they are written? Like what they are proposing is a mid-season change to essentially cripple the Mercedes engine when they have shown a special trick similar to what the double diffuser would have been in the past.
The way I look at it, right, and I think this is across like anything, is if you set a rule set and a team finds a way to not break the rules but kind of like play with them a little bit, then they should, in my opinion, be allowed to do so. It's actually on the people. Like, I don't think you can set a rule and then be annoyed that people have found a loophole or a bit of a gray area in the rule. You actually just got to be a little bit more diligent in terms of like, this is the rule and there is like no scope for change here. But you know, if a team like Mercedes can find a way to kind of like make it work in their favor or like a slight workaround that isn't breaking a rule necessarily, then I'm all for it personally, because I think it then becomes, it's actually on the team, like, you know, like the FIA, to actually find ways to make the rule set a lot more strict in terms of what actually is encompassing each and every like thing that they kind of push forward. So the way I kind of put it is I really think like if you can find a way to slightly run in the gray area and you find a way for it to be legal to run in the gray area, then I think you should be allowed to do so, because it's not your fault. Like, you are actually going within the scopes of the rules put in front of you. That's not your fault that you found some way to kind of slightly play with it. That's on the people making the rules themselves. So yeah, as a whole, like, I think it's interesting. And just touching on the Mercedes thing, like I from testing, it feels like obviously it was a bit of a rocky testing for them, right? You know, like they, you know, first like instant. I mean, basically, they didn't really get to see too much until the final day, basically, with Mercedes, right? They had like, you know, a lot of issues in terms of like early problems, and I think also like Kimi in particular looked like really uncomfortable. Like he had a lot of struggles, a lot of like kind of car problems. Only to the last day that we got to see the real running of this car, but. As a whole, I think they, for me, are hiding a little bit there. I mean, I saw an interview with Leclerc when they were kind of asking just generally about Ferrari as a whole and what he was thinking. But he was talking and saying like, I think Mercedes are hiding something here. I don't think we've got to see a kind of a full instance. So I think it could be an interesting year with this kind of upcoming meeting, that if they can kind of get past that and nothing really changes, then the kind of first few races of the season are going to be really quite spicy.
Yeah, we'll obviously discuss the engine regulation if it ever changes after this Wednesday meeting. But Quacke, question for you then. Max was the first person on track to be using extra downshift for regeneration of the batteries. Quickly, it was copied by everyone else on day 2 and day 3. Is this similar to the 2020 rule cycle switch that you enjoyed watching, where adaptable drivers like Max and Charles could steal a march compared to the others?
I think it could be, yeah. And I think that's one of the big advantages that Red Bull have as well, is that they have a very adaptable driver who is going to find the optimal way to drive this car and is going to drive it that way. It's so yeah, I do think that's a big advantage for them. It's interesting with the downshifts, because that's something which is going to be an issue for, or as an issue for viewers mostly, but also for drivers, is that you're gonna have a lot of situations where the engine sort of caps out, where it maxes out, and where you're honestly better off. Like, you're gonna have long straights in 2026. At the end of the straight, it's advantageous for you to downshift, so you can regenerate more energy there. because you're basically going to have the MGUK at the end of a long straight. It's going to have generated so much energy, it has to start braking. Like it's put out so much energy, it's going to have to start actively
Yeah.
braking even while you're on full throttle coming down the straight,
Mm-hmm.
just to like recover more energy, and that's just how it's going to end up
Yeah.
being. Um, and being able to recognize those patterns and learn about them quickly is going to be a big driver advantage.
Yeah, I haven't gotten the full data analysis that I was running just yet, but from what I could see, the engines are clipping a lot on the straight. Like they've even started mentioning a new term in terms of super clipping, where the car reaches its top speed somewhere around the middle of the straight instead of towards the end of it, because, like you said, the battery runs out and then they have to start recharging it again. I think that is going to be something that becomes a problem for the fans, the casual fans that are watching and don't really understand what all the mumbo jumbo means. And for those guys, it might seem weird that the cars aren't at their fastest despite keep continuing to accelerate across the whole straight. Nyokai, what's your take on the whole aspect of the engines maybe lacking a bit of power?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I do wonder how teams trying to adapt to that kind of heading in towards this year. I've done a little bit of a look into it, but again, like this is where I kind of come in and saying that, a bit more of a casual fan. I'm still kind of trying to get my head around it a little bit. But I think, like you said, like for a bit more of a casual viewer, it is like a bit of a confusing thing of like, the reasoning behind it and how will that affect the races going forward. But I mean, you see already from what we've seen in the testing where teams, and especially I think some of these individual drivers who are a little bit more nerdy with it, like your kind of Maxes, for example, they're going to find ways to actually make this an advantage for
Yeah.
them. So I do wonder how Red Bull kind of adapt going forward. But from what we've seen so far, everything looks pretty good, and they are finding ways to make it, I guess, in a way, slightly advantageous. So if their straights are as quick as they have been looking, and they can find a way to kind of continue keeping, it's like the recharge of the battery right into all those corners and that downshifting. I think it could be kind of interesting in terms of what these fights can be like. I think also as well, like I was reading an article about how teams were a bit concerned about, especially with kind of these new engine regulations, how the start of races are going to be. Like they're
Yeah.
going to get quite chaotic, right? That for me, in a way, I think is quite exciting. Like, more often than not, the first lap is kind of like so funny because it is like carnage in its own sense. Getting out of the blocks kind of quick and trying to get yourself into a kind of a bit of a gap from the pack itself. And I think that's where cars like Red Bull feel like they're in a bit of an advantageous spot, and probably Mercedes if they are kind of sandbagging a little bit.
Yeah, Quacke, we'll just jump into the race start problem that Neo mentioned there. Uh, Teams are saying that, particularly McLaren is saying that the race starts might be utterly shambolic this season because the turbos need a full 10 seconds to spool up to the speed that they need to be revving at. We have lost the MGUH, which was revving the turbos up previously, and the only team that is theoretically not affected is Ferrari, since Vasseur somehow predicted this happening over 12 months ago and changed the engine's direction to go in that way as well. What are your thoughts on the entire race start debate? And we saw a couple of flubbed race starts in the testing itself as well.
I I haven't I hadn't actually heard about this, but that's alarming. I think it's not the end of the world. I mean, as long as it's more or less equal among the different cars, then I don't think it's the end of the world that we have a bit of turbo lag in that sense. It's just really gonna suck if we end up having like some engines are much better and some engines are much worse, and you end up having so you end up having this situation where like, oh, it's obvious that the Red Bull is gonna get off the line quicker because that turbo is much better than the Mercedes
Yeah.
or whatever. That's gonna end up really boring if that's the case. Um, but no, I don't mind. You have the formation lap. I mean, you have the ability to spool up the turbo, and for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time, you end up sitting on the grid on a bit of throttle anyway, just before the lights go out anyway. Like it's, I think it's just going to be a different kind of strategy in that sense.
You
Also, I
watched,
must say,
yeah.
I find it funny that McLaren are the ones complaining just because Max can't fucking start properly, as we saw all of last season. Of course, he's the one who's his team are like, oh, it's going to be carnage and something needs to change. Of course, you guys think that because you guys can't start already, and now you're worried that you're not going to be able to get to the right speed out the gates. Basically, what's going to happen is that Max is going to lose even more places from starting on pole.
I like how you slipped into talking about Max instead of Lando, despite Lando being the
No, yeah,
one.
I meant
Yeah.
Lando. I meant Lando. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
exactly. It's all good. But it was really funny to me just because he's won the championship, he's suddenly given all of his woes over to Max now. Yeah, you are also classically someone who enjoyed Hamilton, like you said.
Mhm.
So overall, what are your thoughts on him coming out and saying that these cars are like really difficult to drive? It's more of a engineer's job than a driver's. Is it more of his old age showing, or is it an actual concern?
Yeah, I also think there's like the issue that we've kind of seen with Lewis, especially since he's kind of gone to Ferrari, is that we've got to see a little bit more of like, I guess, unfortunately, like the downsides to his character a little bit. It really does feel like, at some point you've got to kind of work with what you've got in front of you, right? And I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
we're at a point now, we've changed kind of like who's on the radio alongside him. He's no longer kind of working kind of like, side by side with Lewis. And that was kind of the main complaint from last year, where he was talking about how like the issues with kind of the team radio and whatnot. But I think at some point he's got to take a bit of, a bit of like responsibility in a sense, right? Yeah, sure, the car may be hard, but also at the same time, like, if we start seeing like Charles looking all right, and I mean, at least from the interviews as well, Charles doesn't seem like too upset. I think it's like tentative at the start. He was saying like definitely stuff we can work on heading in towards this year. But as a whole, it felt like a pretty decent testing for Ferrari. And we're in a
Yeah.
position now where if we start seeing this, they complete a hell of a lot of laps as well for Ferrari. So if we
Mm-hmm.
kind of come in towards this season, and it's another one of those where it's like, a lot of complaints coming through from Lewis individually, but at the same time, like his like, I guess, like direct rival in teammate is actually feeling relatively optimistic, like cautiously optimistic is what it seemed like from the interviews with Charles. Then I think at some point you've got to start talking about Lewis, maybe again, like you said, like a bit of that old age showing. As much as I love him and for what he's done for the seed as a whole, his whole time at Ferrari has not been great. I think it was like he's kind of maybe his own worst enemy in a sense, that he probably came in with like really high expectations, like joining such a legacy kind of franchise in the way of Ferrari is. And like we talk about kind of what this car in the past has been able to bring and always been like relatively quite competitive, but he individually has really struggled to be competitive. I think a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
seems like it's like kind of like he's, I forget the word, but he's essentially kind of like his own emotions are showing through his like disdain in the car rather than his
Yeah.
own kind of individual ability struggling.
Yeah, he's even got the excuses out for this season already. He was talking about how
Yeah.
Ricardo Adami is no longer his engineer, and
Mhm.
despite that likely being a Hamilton-led change, I would assume at least, uh, he's saying that because they are bringing in a new race engineer from him, the rumor is from McLaren, and that will
Mhm.
happen only midway through the season. He's going to struggle with communication and everything. Quacky, do you buy into that excuse? Because we've seen Max win races even when GP is on leave.
Yeah, I don't. No, I think I'm not sure it makes that big of a difference what kind of race engineer you have. Obviously, you need to have a good one. I'm not sure. After this much time in F1, I think you know what you want to get out of your race engineer. I
Mm-hmm.
think most drivers are able to relay that, and I think most good race engineers are going to be like receptive to that feedback and be able to make changes. So obviously, having a good partnership is necessary, but it's more so like a box you need to take off. I don't think one relationship, like two good relationships, are necessarily making that big of a difference next to each other, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Outside of the restart problems that Stella and Norris were mentioning in interviews, McLaren was largely invisible throughout the test for me. They had some good laps, they had strong running across the board, and nothing really went wrong for the team. Kwaki, what's your general opinion on how McLaren's looking?
I don't feel like they've topped the times, and generally speaking, they've been running up front pretty much all the time. They've had their
Mm-hmm.
third day time there is it's not the fastest in the session overall, but it's the fastest of that session. Um, and they've been up there generally. They've had really good really good lap counts. 161 in the first session, 149 in the second, um, and then another 100 and what is that? 112 in the third. So I don't think they're in dire straits. I think they committed to an interesting thing at the start of the season, which was when Zach Brown said the car that you see in the Barcelona test,
Yeah.
we didn't see the car that was in the Barcelona test, was going to be unchanged until Australia, so they won't bring any upgrades until the second round.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you're focusing on really understanding what you've developed, but you're also putting a lot of faith into these concepts that they've picked. And so far it's looking good. I mean, but we don't know like who's sandbagging, who's going to be able to come up with good changes. If they see that, oh no, we have a problem, there's something on the car which is not working, they cannot change it until round 2, and that's quite late on, to be honest.
Neo, what's your take on McLaren? Have you seen any difference between Lando and Oscar on track so far?
I mean, this side, I think if I'm right in saying they complete the most laps, right, of any team, like
so.
across the testing. And I think, when you look at it for me, I think like them and Williams were like tied at the top, right? So the way I kind of look at it is like, I think McLaren, like every other team, are looking at kind of like ways they change and ways they improve. For McLaren, I've actually got a bit of a weird thing with like it's actually ways you find consistency across seasons, which I think a lot of teams have struggled with, especially over the last kind of few years, where we've kind of like struggled to find like that level. And I think for McLaren, the big thing for them is that they actually don't really need anything drastically to improve in a sense, right? Obviously, it was such a great season last year. I kind of won the season outright. What felt in terms of like the constructors, right, from such an early stage.
Yeah.
Again, it's just about trying to like lean back into that and say like, what we did last year worked and just keep it up. I mean, sure, we can talk about individual drivers between kind of Oscar and Lando, but I mean, as a whole for McLaren, you're just looking at this team, and for them, they're in quote unquote the easiest possible, at the same time maybe even the hardest thing of like, we've just got to maintain this now. We're still arguably the most competitive team coming into us this year. We're still in a position where our car's being very, very good and also really reliable in the testing, which is a really positive sign. I think, there's a lot to like from other teams. Like Mercedes look quite quick, right? We kind of saw both kind of George and Kimi have like nice moments, for example. We saw flip sides, like, Aston Martin had the kind of these struggles, Alpine had these struggles. For McLaren, it is in a way them going under the radar in a sense. I don't think it's a bad thing because they're going under the radar while still being a really reliable car, still really quite quick as well. Like they both had really decent lap times, both Lando and Oscar. And I think the big thing for them is just like kind of trying to bunker down and say, right, we've got to come into us this year, same mentality. So like, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing in the sense that they were kind of under the radar, because the focus isn't on them in terms of like what to improve, because inherently they don't need to improve anything. So things were so good last year. It's just about kind of like doubling down on it. It's why I think attention has been drawn elsewhere to like all the kind of quote unquote contenders in a sense, because they're the ones who have the most eyes on them of like, can they actually compete? Because it still is a McLaren side with a target on their back, and it seems like they're fine with that target on their back. And at least from what we've seen in interviews from them, they all seem relatively confident in the car, right? It seems like it's like there's not loads to kind of hate on it, and for the most part, that's a good sign.
Yeah. Well, that's the contenders all done. So we'll move into the wide spread apart midfield that we have right now. I'll take Haas as the first one. Much like what you guys said about McLaren, they were pretty much invisible and under the radar from the test, but they got really solid mileage, didn't get any negative headlines. Quacke, do you think the Haas is looking like the midfield leader right now?
Honestly, yeah, they have pretty good lap times. Like Ocon is up there with a time which is within a second of Norris's quickest time in the third session, while running over 100 laps. Behrman as well, third quickest time in the second session, or on the second day, 130 laps in that same session, and yeah, a lot of laps run on the day one as well. So, and both drivers were in with top 10 times at that point as well. So
Yeah.
I'd say it looks good. I'd say it looks really good. They, ahead of the season we were talking about how Williams were going to be like the contender, and then I was still sort of thinking, well, Aston Martin can maybe take a step forward. Aston Martin, we're going to get onto them, but they don't really look like they're competing in that sense.
Yeah.
And at this point, Williams, like in all three sessions, they've absolutely topped Williams 100%, while doing sufficient lap time. This is really good. I would say they are front running in the midfield right now.
Yeah, talking about Williams a bit more now. The car got a lot of mileage, which they clearly needed after missing Barcelona. The car is fast, but still significantly overweight. With the weight loss that they can probably get on in a few races, have they done enough to complete the Barcelona comeback?
I mean, that's the big thing, right? Without that kind of like pre-testing the way that every other team did, I mean, obviously it's like inherently just a kind of a setback. And the big hope was, all right, you skip Barcelona, you come in towards Bahrain, and you're thinking, okay, cool. They've had a bit more time to prep this car and a bit more time to also kind of scope out the field a little bit. And my expectation was coming in towards this, like, right, cool. Are we going to see like Sainz look really quick again, as we saw at times last season? We can see Albon really kind of bring what he can to the table, and it was so underwhelming. If anything, not even just underwhelming, it was actually really quite poor, right? Times are slow. As you talk about, this car's so overweight. And now the question, I think, shifts on the car itself is fine in terms of like like I mentioned, a lot of laps under their belt, so we know that like the reliability is a good thing there. The big thing is like until they shed this weight, they actually can't compete. Not only with like where I think Williams want to be, where they're like like a team competing or like on kind of the fringe of the big boys, right? Which is I think
Yeah.
where they were kind of scaling up into. It really felt like for the last few years, like Williams had gone from being like a non-form, a non-contender to actually a team that are starting to show a little bit of prowess towards the kind of upper middle part of the pack, but the
Mm-hmm.
way this kind of testing started, it's been so poor that I'm really worried they can't shed this weight early. They are going to tank so early in the season that recovering points in the kind of mid to later parts of the season are actually be quite difficult. So yeah, Williams in a weird spot. But again, like, on kind of that flip side for Haas, I actually think they're in a position now where there isn't anybody that can compete with them in terms of like that middle of the pack, right? They are for me
Yeah.
like the large in part team that are out there. I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about Audi. There was like some nice moments from them, and it was like a nice-ish moments from the likes of Colapinto, but even still, like as a team, Haas look really solid. Behrman and Ocon both looking really stable. I mean, the big thing is can you get Ocon kind of consistently completing races right
Yeah.
throughout the season? That's obviously always like his big thing. But I like what I see from Haas. Car looks quick, a lot of laps under their belt. There's a lot to like about them. As in terms of like contenders for that kind of like upper middle part of the pack, for me, they are in the lead. Where the flip side for
Mm-hmm.
Williams, they've gone from being the team that I expected to be in the lead and are actually towards the bottom end.
Yeah. Quacke, I'll throw you back to 2024 if you can remember. Alpine had a similar crash test issue at the start of the season, and they also came into the season quite overweight. But towards the second half of the season, we saw Gasly regularly put in like top five qualifyings and got a number of like seventh place results in that season as well. Plus, we had the double podium for Alpine at Brazil, despite the rain effect, of course. Do you think Williams have the potential still to shed the weight and get back up to pace real quick?
I'm not sure if I think it's gonna happen real quick, but over the course of the season, yeah, absolutely, this is absolutely a manageable deficit. Like you can absolutely work back from this. And I think they started last season not for similar reasons, but they did have a bit of a downside. And the start of this season, they had quite a bit of troubles with um, what's his name,
Getting
Science.
signs on board, yeah.
Yeah, getting
Yeah.
Science up to speed was quite tricky for them last year. They still managed to get it up and running, and they finished the season. I would say they finished the season stronger than they started it last year, all in all. So yeah, it's definitely a team that I think can work from the back, and it's not an insurmountable challenge. No.
Yeah. Talking about the Alpine a bit more, there were a few red flags, a few failures for the team, but they didn't lose much running time. In fact, they got the car turned around really quickly after every single time. The car looks solid, but it's not quite the Mercedes engine is an instant podium or an instant win that they would have hoped for last year, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, go
yeah,
on, take
exactly.
it.
No, it's when you have the Mercedes engine, everybody talks about it being the fastest. It feels like okay, Alpine maybe have fixed their biggest issue. Um, turns out there's some more issues. I think they still have some. I'm honestly a little bit bullish on them because I thought they might be a bit shit this year. But they've done
Mm-hmm.
some interesting things. And there's one thing in particular. I'm going to send you guys a picture because it's something I found. They are, if you look at the rear wing and compare the
Yep.
teams in this picture, they're the only team who have the active arrow on the rear wing is the upper plane moving, not the lower plane.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think,
Mm.
in my opinion, that should mean that they have a lot of straight line speed because they have a bigger drag reduction because they don't have this upper plane creating drag. I don't know if it's a better concept, but it's unique in any case. And that's something considering how important those straight line speeds are going to be and how much that active arrow is going to play a part in this season and with these regulations. It's interesting that they've tried something special. They have an engine which should be equal to half the grid, and I think things could look good, but it's not as good as I thought they would start the season off being shit anyway because they are Alpine and somehow they would. It's looking slightly better than I expected, and I'm sort of
Yeah.
intrigued by their car.
Yeah, Neo, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize that about that kind of rear wing. So that's actually kind of interesting. I do wonder whether that will help with kind of that straight line speed. But I mean, as a whole, with Alpine, I've always kind of been so up and down on this team in terms of like what I expect from them. There was some nice moments, I think, throughout kind of the testing. I think for Colapinto, again, showing that he can actually bring a lot of decent pace. I think he was just outside of the top 10 across like the 3 days of testing, which is not bad for him. But I think for Alpine, it's about figuring out kind of where they want to be now, right? Because this is a side that I think initially I had the ideas of wanting to be super competitive, but unfortunately, we're in a position where like I think we're not maybe getting enough out of Pierre Gasly compared to kind of the name value in a sense. And what do they need to do to kind of get him back to being maybe not so much a contender, but at least getting consistently in around that kind of top 5, right? And being there to be a competitor with what on paper this car can bring to the table. Because on paper, it looks like it should be all set up to be quite successful. Obviously, they've got what seems like a really decent car and they've got decent reps under their belt. But I don't know. It feels a little bit strange for me where it's like I feel like we're still wanting a little bit more of them. They also are kind of towards that lower end in terms of the amount of laps they did, which is
Yeah.
I don't know about necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but inherently you probably want to lean more towards the latter and say that like, more laps, more testing, more data, right? And they didn't get as many compared. I think they were third least I'm seeing here, which is never a good sign. So it's for Alpine, it's about like I think it's always that kind of want for a little bit more, but I think this season compared to especially last season, I feel like I've got more to like about them, and maybe that actually is to because of the fact that like the teams around them seem like they're kind of flailing a little bit, but maybe Alpine can kind of capitalize upon it.
Yeah, I think I'll have to push back on the Gasly topic a little bit at least, because if you looked at how good he has done across the second half of both the previous seasons, he's putting in top 5 qualifyings in a car that has no reason to be anywhere close to that level. Like last year, I think there was a stat that he had more Q3 or Q2 finishes than Hamilton himself, which is like bizarre for a driver that is driving an Alpine. And on top of that, they were down as high as a 30 horsepower deficit because of their lack of a strong ERS system in the car last year. So maybe that has even trained Gasly to lack the battery power that everyone else is going to face this season. So that's what makes me quite hopeful about the Alpine. I honestly think that they'll be towards the upper half of the midfield when it comes to it. And like you said, that some part of it is because of the other team struggling as well. Quacke, you were quite interested in the Audi topic. Big sideboards update on day one, and the car looked comfortable enough from the get go for the drivers to be trying stuff like the max double downshift technique. There were a myriad of stoppages for them throughout Barcelona. Compared to that, this is a good result for the team, right?
Very much so. I think that car being as different as it is from the others with those vertical side pods, and the fact that they go for that concept despite how the Mercedes zero side pod concept didn't work out in the 2022 regulations. It's interesting they still go for that, but it seems to have worked fine enough because like they are not last, which is good enough for them. Like they have an entirely new engine manufacturer. There's a lot of new stuff happening, and they go for an entirely new car concept at that. The fact that they still have a driver who is able to put in times like within about 2 seconds of the leading car, and the fact that they can still get significant lap time under the belt with that engine is a big win for them. And look, for this year, I think their goal is to lift themselves off of last place, like to avoid being last place. I think is their main goal for this season, should be anyway. And they managed to do 100 laps on each day of running. That's a very good step towards that direction.
Neokai, what's your hope level on Audi's first year in Formula One?
And things seem quite positive for them. I think it's always a kind of a good indicator as well when you actually look at kind of like how the response of the team is. Both even from the drivers, but even Wheatley himself being like really actually quite positive with it. They were talking about like how productive of a kind of a weekend it was, right? And how they were really, I mean, like you mentioned, like a lot of good laps under their belt and actually looking relatively pacey. I kind of came in towards this one like with a lot of like maybe lower expectations of Audi. Like I didn't really know what to expect from this side and can they actually get to a position of being like middle of the pack competitive, but I actually like what I see from them. Like this is a lot of good laps under their belt. I think they looked really solid as well. It's good to see kind of Hulkenberg getting it back out there and again looking like a really kind of stable and quite quick driver in a sense. But as a whole, like the team themselves, the vibes seem quite high. Like I think I saw like an interview where Wheatley was talking about like how cohesive of an effort it was from the side, and they learned so much in the testing and from Barcelona as well. I mean, everyone might say they were the first side on track, right? They were actually, again, like really eager to get this car out there. They've got
Yeah.
now got so much data to kind of bunker down on before this first race. Like, I'm kind of like positively optimistic about Audi actually being a little bit more competitive than like, you know, I guess like what I probably initially expected of this team. I kind of expected them to come in and just be like sort of whatever, right? But they actually look like there might be a little bit of something about them.
Yeah, I'll give you the other new team as well then. Cadillac had the Barcelona test that they ran was honestly quite bad. They had a number of stoppages. Perez on one of the sessions that he ran only had like 11 laps, which is appalling. But this time it was surprisingly decent. There were still a few red flags from them, but overall the car looked all right. They aren't completely like 10, 15 seconds off the back of everyone else. Nikolai, how do you feel about Cadillac?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't really know what to expect out of the side, right? I think I saw like a couple of times in the testing, or actually more so than a lot of the teams, it kept locking up, right? This Cadillac, which is like never a good sign. On some of these corners, it looked a little bit kind of shaky for me, where like the amount of times we saw that Cadillac lock up. The testing initially, like you mentioned, Barcelona wasn't brilliant from them, but again, they still managed to get like I think like you know a decent amount of laps. It's just unfortunate. It just feels like the pace really isn't there for this car. Like Sergio just didn't really look like he was offering really all that much. And the fact that he's like kind of in a position where we're seeing like kind of consistently like a Williams car that is overweight still getting faster times than them, not really a good sign. We're seeing them kind of like being in and around like a really poor Aston Martin or like, you know, Lindblad, of course, because the new boy in the block. And it's sort of like we're seeing like Perez and Bottas be like in and around that conversation. I still don't think it's where the side want to be. They probably want to be more along the likes of like an Audi or like a kind of like a Williams, for example, and trying to kind of push with this car. But for me, I'm like, I'm a little bit cautious about this side. I feel like it could be a bit of a rough start to the year, but you know, a lot of that kind of teething issues early, and also as well on top of that, you know, with the issues that they had, they just didn't get like loads of laps out, which is never a good sign. Like it seems like there is definitely consistency issues with that engine, so we'll see what it looks like coming in towards this year. But I'm a little bit cautiously, maybe like scared of what Cadillac might bring to the start of the year.
Yeah, before we jump into everyone's favorite team, Aston Martin, then, Quacke, I just realized that VCARB exists because I had completely dropped them off the list. Yeah, so talk to me about VCARB and have you seen anything about them?
No, it's. I never know what to read into this. This is a team that doesn't really have ambitions of going that far up the grid, or usually doesn't anyway. It has a driver lineup which is relatively inexperienced, which is mostly there for the reps more than anything. I'm fine with them, you know, running under 100 laps in a couple of these days. I'm fine with them being a couple of seconds off the pace, because the preseason doesn't really tell me anything about racing bulls. So it's they also have an interesting concept. They have a very big airbox, which is very interesting. And talking again about like, if I'm gonna predict how I think, I wonder what that says about the we talked about this on the show when we discussed the first couple of cars. The airbox is really big, which to me suggests that they have big cooling requirements, and I wonder what that says about the Red Bull engine. But then the actual Red Bull doesn't even have that big of an airbox to compare. So I don't know. It's we'll have to see basically what happens over the course of the season for them. But I mean, it's good for them to get reps. The reps, they're still like they could have had a tech issue filled testing. They could have had like big crashes and whatnot, but Lawson gets 119 laps in on day one, and then Lindblad and him combine for well over 100 laps on day two as well. So it's good for Lindblad to get these reps in, and it's good to get some data.
Yeah. I think all I'll say on the Racing Bulls is that the engine is obviously solid from what we have seen from Red Bull, but the chassis is leaving a bit more on the table than it usually does. Like Lindblad and Lawson both look rather uncomfortable with the driving style that is now required. And overall, the test was honestly, I would expect them to be closer to the front than they are, because they are one of the teams that isn't changing a whole lot in terms of their team structure and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to expect for kind of you know the Racing Bulls heading in towards this season. I think, like you said, like it's like you know it's such an inexperienced lineup. You're now looking at this team, or I guess like individually, you're looking at somebody like a Lawson to be like a now what feels like a bit more of a leading figure, right? You know, we're
Yeah.
going to Lindbergh coming in, a new boy. You've got Lawson to kind of lead, but I don't know if I'm like really convinced about him being like kind of like a figurehead of this side, right? Like, is this going to be like the right person that you want backing up? I think he's like a good driver to be like a second in command kind of driver. But if he's like I guess in a sense, like usually your focal point of points, right? I don't know how convinced I am by that. You know, he's a bit of an erratic driver in the sense. I think he also has like this natural ability to not finish races. And I don't know if that's like necessarily a good thing. And then you actually wanting like Limblad to be kind of your consistent force to get this car over the line, but at the same time, like he's so new, and with all the changes that are coming towards this season, it's kind of like it's quite a big ask for like quite a young new driver to F1. I mean, obviously, like his F2 and F3 stints look pretty solid. Like race wins picked up there for the most part. It looks quick there, but like it's a whole different kettle of fish jumping up from like the F3 and F2 into F1 and expecting him to be consistent there as well. I mean, Lawson can attest for that, right? Same thing happened to him when he made that jump up. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how convinced I am by Racing Bulls, but the way things are looking, at least from testing, it looks like they'll be towards the bottom of the pack.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other team that will definitely join them there is your favorite racing green colored, Aston Martin. The first point in my notes just says it's so over. So, Neokai, talk to me about Aston Martin.
Yeah, they were ass, man. They were so bad. Like this is not a good look for Aston Martin. I mean, they were just terrible across the entirety. You know, when we talk about it, not only just like the pace, like I mean, granted, expected Stroll's going to be towards the bottom. Let's not beat around the bush
Yeah.
here. The guy's ass, right? But Alonso, we're expecting a lot more out of him, right? And it's not a good sign. But I think more than anything, like, we can kind of harp on a little bit about the drivers individually, and we're probably obviously expecting way more out of Alonso than what we got. Looks so unbelievably slow, this car in testing. Like, it's like a full like 5 seconds behind the top, right?
Yeah.
Which is just like as far from being competitive as possible. But also the fact that they got the least amount of laps by quite a margin as well. Like Mercedes were the second least, but they obviously had some issues, especially with Kimi. And on top of that as well, still posted really decent speeds. Aston Martin posted the worst speeds, both of their drivers, and on top of that, got the least amount of laps by like 80. So I mean, it's not a good sign at all. This car looks really uncompetitive, really slow, really, really inconsistent as well. Like I think they're in a lot of trouble heading in towards this year. And I don't even know really kind of like how you change this. Like, I think the big kind of talking point of them was about kind of this like reliability that they've had, and they were like kind of limiting how many laps they're actually giving the cars. But like, that's like the last thing you really want to be having, right? This car that's already struggling. And then on top of that, it's like it's already struggling, and then they'd be limited amount the amount of reps that they're getting out. Like, it's not good. Like, in terms of how our testing goes, it was far from smooth.
Yeah, before I throw it to you, Quacke, Pedro Della Rosa, the team spokesperson, had a press session where he made a number of excuses that I really don't buy into. Firstly, he said that Adrian Newey only started in April instead of the January date they would have hoped for after his gardening leave. On top of that, Honda had left F1 after 2021, and some of their crew had moved on to other places like Red Bull itself. Then they came back late into the regulation cycle. Quackhead, don't you think Aston should have known all this when they were signing their deals with both of these people, and they chose to partner with them regardless?
Oh, you'd think so, wouldn't you? you would. You'd think, no, that doesn't move the needle whatsoever. That doesn't explain anything about why they're bad. But I just no, that's just really stupid. And I'm wondering, like, what is actually going wrong for them? Because do they have a? I'm assuming the answer is going to be they have a problem across the board. They're slower around the entire lap, on straights, in corners, whatever, everything. But is it Honda? Is it just Honda that is the problem? Or surely it can't be. You can't lose 4 seconds just of having having a bad engine alone. But no, it's bad. It doesn't sound good from the driver's side either. Alonso seems to really hate it here. The lap times kind of show it as well. And yeah, at the very least, they've gotten some laps in. At the very least.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Alonso a bit more, this is just exactly what his nightmare would have given him. Like, Honda is back, they have given him a GP2 engine again, and there's nothing really positive looking at Honda itself. Like, most of their good stuff has moved to Red Bull's project instead, and a lot of people weren't brought back from the Honda dispersal that happened at the end of 2021. Do you expect Honda to catch up quickly with the rest of the pack?
No, is the simple answer. I mean, it really isn't a good sign, man. I just think the fact that like the whole conversation really around everything here is that like it's not looking good and everyone's really concerned about it. And then the fact that we're seeing so many excuses being made for it, but with like no real pathways that kind of rectify the situation. It's not a good look, man. I really don't know what they do, but you can just kind of tell that everyone's sort of displeased with where Honda are at the moment. So I don't know,
Yeah.
man. I'm not feeling good about where they're at.
hmm Yeah, just wrapping things up real quick then. Quacke, what are the things that you want to see from week 2 of Bahrain testing that is going to kick off soon?
I want to see more push laps, and I want to see some more. In general, I want to see some more discussion around like how these cars really are on the limit. A lot of the time during testing, you have no
Mm-hmm.
idea. You just see that they ran 57 laps and they were 2 seconds behind the leader at this lap time. You have no idea if that's their race pace, which is 2 seconds off the leading car's push lap or whatever. I want to see some of the cars just really get out there. Let's give us some actual benchmarks of like when you put this car to the limit, how are they doing? Because that's something that's talked about a lot, is how with the energy recovery and with how these regulations are shaking out, push laps are actually quite difficult because you do need to manage your energy. You need to manage quite a
Yeah.
bit, and some drivers have gone as far to say you cannot push full throttle or anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be nice to have like a definite. I'm sure we've had push laps already, but like it seems like with how the times are spread, obviously not every team has done that. I want to see every team get out there and just do a couple of laps on full qualification simulation, just to see sort of what
Yeah.
we're dealing with.
Yeah. Neokai, we are going to have all 8 hours of every single day broadcast this time, unlike the 1 hour sessions that we got from
Mm.
last week. Are you excited to be watching a lot more testing?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy kind of tuning in for Bahrain just because it was all like for me, it was all like what are we going to get off the back of the speculation. But I think the fact that we get that kind of the full kind of broadcast in a sense is going to be kind of interesting just to see, and more so in if anything how teams react to kind of the mishaps, right? When we see the lockups happen,
Yeah.
when we see the engine failures come through, like what is the kind of like reaction going to be? Is it going to be kind of panic, or are we actually going to see these teams figure out like, okay, this is happening because of this, and this is fixable, this is workable, and this is going to set us up for the season? But you're right. I think we need to see a little bit more of like pushing these cars really to the limit, even if it does end up meaning that like, we see a bit more of these problems with the engine. You've actually got to figure out like you've got to basically in this testing. I want to see a little bit more in terms of like kind of quote unquote under race conditions, as they like to call it, right? Where we actually get to see these cars go full out, and you actually have to push them to the limit to see really where the limit is, and that's where you're actually looking towards kind of the big hitters, like your Mercedes, like your Red Bulls, for example, like your McLarens, right? These guys I think need to be coming in towards the testing, and pretty early on, I think as well, give on like a lot in terms of like go full out and see what is like the furthest you can push this car. So you need to know for the season itself, or what needs to be tweaked before Australia.
Yeah, the thing I'm looking forward to the most is finally having all the live timing data that I so desperately craved across the last week. Because last week it was very intermittent. We got some of the timing data eventually, but none of it was very coherent. This time I'm watching every single driver's POV. I'm getting every single lap time I can get, and hopefully we'll discuss on the next episode as well. So finally, initial opinions on the regulation as a whole. Me and Quacke were both quite excited for 2026. Quacke, has it dulled down a bit?
It has. Yeah, there's a lot of negative talk right now. I feel like every single driver being asked about how these cars are to drive gives some sort of a negative answer. We've had a lot of talk from, you know, Alonso saying that the cars are very slow, that their car is very slow through a couple of these corners. It's not just a symptom of the Aston Martin. It's all of the cars
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
are they have slower cornering speeds than they used to have, and we have you know overall the lap times are slower. That's to be expected because we have new regulations, yada yada yada. But the racing also seems to be a bit difficult. We've had some worrying talk about drivers finding it difficult to follow other cars. We've had drivers talking about how much they need to manage, meaning they can't ever really push because
Yeah.
they always need to manage the energy requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, I'm kind of down on it. But I do like that we have much quicker top speeds with the active arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Straight line speed is much faster, and that's quite exciting. Honestly, I kind of like that this extra downshift technique that Max is using is a bit more challenging. On corner entry, you don't really want to be skipping gears that way because you
Yeah.
have much bigger chance of wheel spin. So I actually kind of like that. That's a skill element. That's some drivers going to struggle with that. And I do actually like that we have had so much runtime. It seems like we haven't really, even across the Barcelona test as well, we didn't really have these what they were scared of, which is why they locked it down so much, where teams just weren't able to run whatsoever, and that would have been embarrassing and whatever. We haven't had that at all, and I really like that. I really like that because it feels like we might have a season where you don't get the infuriating reliability troubles that can actually be quite tricky at the start of a new regulation set. So that I like.
Yeah, Neokai 0 to 10, what grade are you giving and how are you feeling?
I think as a whole, I think like it's like a strong 7 is kind of where I'm leaning. I think kind of like similar to kind of what Quack was saying about like I do feel like this year it feels like there's going to be a little bit more of that kind of skill element. It's actually going to really, I think, separate like the real skill, I guess, from like, I mean, people always love to harp on about like how it's the car that makes the event, not the driver, right? But I think this year it feels more so than what we've seen maybe in previous years, where actually you actually are going to have real decent skill in terms of like handling these beasts, especially on those corners. And it's going to really start to kind of like isolate who actually is like that really, really solid driver in a sense, and who also just got the benefit of the car. And I also feel like this year it feels like it might be more competitive. I mean, the issue I had last year, obviously, and this kind of does happen quite a bit, where it kind of felt from the get go we already knew who was going to win the constructors, right? It was a pretty kind of one horse race, and it was like kind of that battle for second in a bit of a way. This year, actually, it does at least initially feel quite open. Like you can make really solid arguments for like 4 separate teams actually being quite interesting to look at towards the top. So I'm really excited. And of course, I think this year as well, we've also got a bit more of an interesting middle of the pack where it's like, I think a few teams look like they're going to be quite competitive there. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it. I think that this year should be really quite exciting.
Yeah, well, that's where we'll wrap this episode up. Neokai, thank you so much for joining us. You're our first guest for this season. We really liked having you on. And Quacke, you as well, my co-host as always. That's where we'll wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you after the next week of Bahrain testing. Bye-bye.